Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I would like to talk about The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. I actually haven't read the books, but I have played the games. I played Dynasty Warriors, and I've been watching the series that they made about the whole thing. And I've also read a little bit about the historical context. It's kind of interesting. I thought I would just talk about it from the perspective that I have. But before we do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about BabsCon. It's coming up in less than 2 weeks. I'm going to do an official video like this, the BabsCon video, and it'll tell you guys what we're doing and what we're gonna sell, and you know where you can find us. There have been changes in the way that the schedule has been explained to me a couple of times. First time they contacted me, like I sent them my application and I was like, could I have a 2-hour panel? And they got back to me and they were like, I tell you what, Greg, we can do an hour and a half, but what if we put you just before Lauren Faust on Saturday? And I said, oh wow, that sounds amazing actually. If you put me there, I'll be happy as a clam. And they were gonna put me in the main hall, and that's really cool. And then later on, they contacted me and they're like, all right, Greg, the schedule is finalized. You are this. It was the same time slot, but they'd moved me to Sunday, and it didn't register right away that they'd moved me to Sunday. But they moved me to Sunday. Sunday, last day of the con, and so I still had my hour and a half. And now the schedule is finalized. It looks like on their website, and I'm listed from 11:45 to 12:45. On Sunday, last day of the con. So I have an hour, last day of the con, during lunchtime, during the last call for autographs, and also the community meet and greet, which I don't know if the community meet and greet's a very big thing. I think that's like the con organizers meet with the people that join. So anyway though, originally was going to be pretty much no advertising needed. We were going to be in the bag. Now it looks like it's going to be slightly more difficult. I'm going to have to sort of push a little bit. So yeah, so we're going to do a thing, and instead of sort of being a little bit hush-hush about all the projects that we're going to have on the table, I will tell you guys what we'll have on the table. Not yet. We're still working on one of them. We have a great big project that is taking a whole ton of time, and we're not done with it yet. We're getting down to the wire. What we might do hopefully we'll finish it, but we'll see. I don't know. I'll announce. I'll do a video and I'll say like, this is where we're going. Like, here's some screen grabs from stuff that we're working on, and then you guys can get excited, and hopefully we won't have like an empty room when we get to the last day of the con lunchtime. So yes. Anyway. Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Romance of the Three Kingdoms. If you're not familiar with this, this is well, it's a romance sort of thing. It's a series of novels that was based on a lot of the conflict that emerged immediately after the fall of the Han Dynasty. This was a period that took place between the Han and the Tang Dynasty, I think it was. And then there was a brief period where they had the Jin Dynasty, and then the Jin Dynasty collapsed because they didn't really have a very good foothold. But anyway, though, it's the story of as the Han Dynasty was collapsing, like, there was a lot of things that were going wrong. Like, the rich elites were buying up all the land, and they were starving out the peasants. And then the eunuchs got in control of a ton of political power because the eunuchs helped some emperor deal with some kind of threat, and the emperor was like, oh, eunuchs, you're so great, and he gave them all kinds of power. So the eunuchs were making a mess, and then what happened was this guy named Dang Zhuo comes in, and he helps kill all the eunuchs, so that the eunuchs are no longer in control of the government. And then Dang Zhuo, he's always depicted as like a big fat guy with a beard. Dang Zhuo, the big fat guy with the beard, takes over the dynasty as he starts to rule as the emperor regent, sort of, or whatever you might call it, as like the advisor to the emperor, who was like a little kid. And it winds up being that he was just kind of debauched according to the books. And this is an interesting thing because I've looked up the books. Like, I haven't read them myself, but because I really like I got into this through the Dynasty Warriors game. Way back in the day, I started playing Dynasty Warriors 3. Like, I just picked it up and I was just like, yeah, I don't know, a new video game. I need a new video game. And I picked up Dynasty Warriors 3. And it's so hokey. It's like a B-movie, the whole thing. Like, you can tell that they had a very low budget for voice acting. And even, like the animation, lots of times, are just completely ridiculous. Like they just have these scenes where, like, characters will show up and the facial expressions will be nuts. And then they'll, like, do things, or they just have this, like, pre-designed animation. They didn't have time to like, mix up the animation, so they just have, like, every character just does the same animation in a group, and it's like a synchronized sort of thing. So it's super hokey, and it's super hilarious, but it's just chocked full of characters because it's based on this very long, it was like 2 generations of conflict, full of all these notable people. and yeah, it would just make me laugh. Like at first, like I played the game and I couldn't, like I had no idea who anyone was, and the game made this absolute fanfare just constantly of like, oh no, Cao Cao is here, and they pronounce him as Cao Cao. Its real name is like Cao Cao, but the voice actors didn't know how to pronounce the name. So like my understanding of how to pronounce the names of these characters has been so badly butchered by Dynasty Warriors 3. Like Xiao Hao Dun. Nobody could agree on how to pronounce his name. I know that there was like one voice actor who calls him Xiao Hao Dun, and then there's another who calls him Xiao Hao Dun. And they all pronounced his name incorrectly, but he just ran around, he had an eye patch and like a big sword and a cape. And you would just play as these guys, and you would run into other guys, and everyone would panic. Lu Bu springs to mind. Lu Bu is really memorable because he has a whole cutscene dedicated to people actually screaming, "It's Lu Bu!" And then he rides in and he cuts people down. If you play as Lu Bu later on too, he gets a bunch of his own little cutscenes. Like they have cutscenes for each of the characters in each of the maps where you get a character-specific cutscene. And like Lu Bu has dialogue, and it's all very it's actually very comical because he sounds like he's angry and slightly constipated. He's just like, "Oh, this is stupid. Go inform Cao Cao. Go and inform Cao Cao." And then he's angry all the time. "I think this plan won't work. I think you're an asshole." And so Lu Bu, he used to crack us up. So after we played this game for long enough, I mean, like, I had a friend who I used to play this with, and that's how I really got into Dynasty Warriors, was that I would sit there and I would play with a friend, and we would just, like, laugh and joke and joke. Like, I remember we once had the Meng Huo and Zhu Rong husband-wife adventures, where Zhu Rong is the wife of Meng Huo, and he ran the Nan Man kingdom, and the Nan Mans were depicted as like these shirtless savage guys who ran around with like spears, and when you kill them they scream. And Lord Meng Huo was like this giant, great, big, fat toddler man. Going forward in the series, it seems like they sort of toned some of this stuff down, and they made it more, I don't know, sensitive, I guess, or they tried to, maybe Meng Huo had, like, ancestors who were writing a lot of angry letters or something like that. Like, "How dare you? Lord Meng Huo was a brilliant and powerful leader. I will come to your house, and I will take an egg, and you don't even know where I'm going to put it, but it's going to be terrible." So yeah, so they got a bunch of angry emails, and so now he's like a super strong, like Hercules-looking guy. But in Dynasty Warriors 3, he was the great big fat toddler king. All of his animations were essentially he just ran like a toddler, like arms, like he waddled everywhere, arms out, and one of his running attack was to actually just fall over. Like you just push the square button, he would just fall over, and whatever he fell into took damage. So Meng Huo, the toddler king. And then he had his wife, Zhu Rong, who you could imagine was supposed to be the smart one in this two-man comedy act. And Zhu Rong ran around in like a bikini, and she was carrying around this like weird triangular scythe thing that she attacked people with. And so my friend thought that Zhu Rong was going to be like a pretty decent character, and it turned out that Meng Huo was actually really good, because Meng Huo had this ability to like, he could pound the ground and he would attack in an area of effect. And because it was a game about fighting armies, Dynasty Warriors, it was basically like you did all these battles, these historical battles, and you would play as the one character, and you would run into an army, and your objective was to smash the army down, and then kill their leader, and then move ahead to the next wave of guys. So Meng Huo had this area of effect attack. He would pound the ground, and like all the enemies around him would get killed. Whereas Zhu Rong had like these little pinpoint laser things, which a lot of the advisors had in Dynasty Warriors 3. And this move was terrible. Like, they had long range, but they did not enough damage, and they didn't hit enough people. So he found out pretty quickly that Zhu Rong actually wasn't a warrior character. She was an advisor character disguised as a warrior character. So he was a little upset, because as the game went on, like Meng Huo was doing really, really well. And I was playing as Meng Huo, and I was getting really into characters. So my friend would be playing, and he would like be getting his ass kicked because his character didn't have enough like attack power. And I would just be talking about like, you know, meat buns, like, dear, I'm looking for a meat bun, feet bun, bring me the meat bun, and just driving him up the wall. And eventually we had to rage quit Meng Huo and Zhu Rong adventures because Meng Huo kept killing officers, and the way that game worked is if you kill an officer, he would drop an item, and the item would make you like stronger. It'd be like +2 to attack. And so if you have one character who's doing really well, eventually he picks up all the +2 attack items and the +2 defense items, whereas the other player is just like, God damn, I can't hardly level up at all. So my friend wound up like way behind in level and stats and everything else like that. So Meng It just got to be like I don't know. We really enjoyed that though, because as far as the role playing the two characters while we played went, it really reinforced this whole idea that Meng Huo was just this big fat undefeatable toddler warrior, whereas his wife was like the intelligent one trying to like work things out and make stuff happen, in spite of the whole world being arrayed against her. So like, yeah. It was pretty great. It would just be like, dear, you need to, like, if I ran off, like, he would get mad. He'd be like, dear, you have to stay here with me. Don't run off where I can't see you. And I'd be like, oh, but I'm just gonna go over and smash up that gate captain, dear. No, not until we get there. Like, we have to wait. We have a schedule. We have to stay on the schedule. So, yeah, by playing like that, because it's always a two-player thing, and if you played on hard mode, usually everyone was too strong for you to run off by yourself. You had to actually stick together and be a team. And like the characters were super outlandish, but they were all super recognizable once you got to know them. So we developed perceptions of their personalities, and then would kind of do this sort of back and forth thing, you know, like where like one guy would play one character and the other guy would play another character, and we would had conversations, like tactical conversations, trying to mimic the voice actors, the terrible voice acting. You know, if you played as Lu Bu, then you had to talk to your friend in this awful, like angry Lu Bu voice, like, this is stupid, and you know, it was fun. It was a great deal of fun. And there was some scenes that were really confusing though too. Like there's one where like Guan Yu dies. And Guan Yu's death is like a really important thing. As far as the Romance of the Three Kingdoms go, I believe that it was written from someone who descended from one particular side of the conflict, and so he really plays up the Shu armies is who it is. He really plays up the Shu armies as being like incredibly noble and altruistic, and it's like they come from humble backgrounds, and they're incredibly wise and kind, and like they get involved in the conflict because they want to restore stability and they care about the people. And then you have like Lord Cao Cao, who's just a murderer and a liar and a total cad, and like everybody hates him, and everybody's just like well, not everybody hates him, everybody inexplicably likes him, but he's just a terrible person. Like everything he does is terrible. So I think that this is actually, I've heard that this is a thing that was carried forward in culture though. Ultimately, Cao Cao wound up with quite a lot of resources and being a pretty serious part of the whole conflict. So, yeah, history is a little bit weird when you get into it. But the point is though, yeah, Guan Yu was regarded as a very important guy, and he dies in Dynasty Warriors. But when he dies, the scene that they had was the voice actor screwed up. And then later on, if you've unlocked Guan Yu, like if you've beaten the game with Guan Yu, what the game will do is it will take dead characters, people who died before like a certain battle, and it'll just put them in the battle. So like Guan Yu dies at some point earlier in history, but because I'd beaten the game with him, like it would just put Guan Yu into later battles, which was very confusing because you got this great big dramatic death scene where like Guan Yu is like standing and he drops his sword and he goes, "In death, my soul will be my brethren." And you could tell that was the voice actor. He misread the line, and they were just like, all right, cut, print, take it. And but it was a big dramatic moment that the voice actor like completely ruined. The death of Guan Yu, one of the most important things in like the entire history of the conflict, and or as far as one of the most important hero deaths as far as they go. And totally flubbed it, and then moved right along. And then later on, he's right in the next battle. Like it's like, oh, now we have to go fight Guan Yu again. So exceptionally confusing, and because of that, because of the way that we noticed that they would change like who was alive and who was dead based on who you beat the game with, we started to actually sit down and do like research on like who are these characters, and why are they being depicted like this? Like what exactly has Koei done that they probably shouldn't have done, but has made this game hilarious and that much more fun? And so we learned a lot about the whole thing, and I can tell you probably an unreasonable amount about the whole thing, in spite of having a weird skewed perspective of it. Like, I believe that if you asked me to explain the entire conflict of the whole Romance of the Three Kingdoms, you would get like a really weird and really incorrect telling with like a grasp of who the characters are. Like, you'd get a proper grasp of the people, but you would get a totally incorrect grasp of the events, because one thing that I'm finding is I'm starting to watch this Dynasty, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms series. It's like an ongoing show. Like, each show is about 45 minutes, and it's pretty great, actually. The acting is a little subpar at times, and the choreographing is not so good, but generally speaking, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms itself is a very interesting story, and while not totally like top-notch A+, it's still like I would give it like a B+, you know, like it's a good watchable show. And the events are far different. Like for example, I kept expecting in Dynasty Warriors, they depict Sun Jian as rushing up a hill and then getting crushed by a landslide. And in the show, he gets ambushed and shot to death with arrows. And so I'm not really sure which is true. Like, both seem like kind of iconic ways to die. He's killed by the same person in both things. But this is what I say when I mean that I probably have an incredibly mixed up perspective of exactly what happened. Because I'm watching the movie play events out in a totally different way, and I recognize the video game probably abridged a lot of things. But you know, a part of me, like, I kind of just want to believe, like, whatever I like the most is what happened. And I sort of like Sun Jian being crushed to death by a rock, because a rock is one of those things I feel like it's a very guttural way to die. To just be like, Sun Jian, noble Sun Jian, crushed by a rock. Sad. Damn. But yes, but it's been fun. Also, Cao Cao is way more villainous in the show. Like, I don't want to spoil too much in case you want to go watch it. Romance of the Three Kingdoms, like, I believe the whole thing's available on YouTube if you want to go check it out. But like Cao Cao, though, he's depicted as just being this almost Snidely Whiplash kind of guy, like much smarter than Snidely Whiplash. He gets away with stuff, but he just runs around and he's like, oh yeah, no, I'll assassinate Dong Zhuo, and then he screws it up, and he just kind of like, he just keeps passing the buck along from person to person, sort of, but while also being responsible in a way. This is the weird dual nature of Cao Cao that they show in this thing, is they have him like do something, it turns out wrong, and he manages to pass off the blame while still working forward and correcting the problem in a way. Which is sort of devious and sort of interesting. It makes him kind of a more, like, you want to follow the character. He's kind of, he kind of has that more evil sort of idea. But yeah. I don't know. Romance of the Three Kingdoms. As far as the book series goes, I hear it's incredibly long, and it takes a long time to get through. And because it's based on history, like, there's all kinds of, like, it's had a couple of rewrites. Like, there's been one person wrote and it was slightly more neutral, and then another person revised it and added a certain amount of, like, they added more bias, and so, like, depending on which version of the story you read, like, one version kind of has fewer good guys in it, and the other one has, like, obviously these are the good guys, these are the people you're supposed to be rooting for. Yeah, like I said, never read the books. I've thought about doing it. In fact, I probably should. If I really want to get the full experience, I probably should. But then I worry that if I did read the books, it would sort of ruin the games for me. Because these super hokey B-movie characters, that's actually kind of what I want to think happened. Like, when the Han Dynasty fell, there were all these, like, really dramatic, like, hokey, silly people. Like, Lu Bu showed up. He just came up out of the blue. Like, this is what happens when a government starts to collapse. Is all kinds of, like, ridiculously clownish people start to show up, and they're like, wait a minute, is the government collapsing? Is structural stability and common sense falling apart? Now is my time to shine! And so basically theater actors all come up in droves, all wanting to take the emperor, take the empire, and make it their own silly, like, well, we're peacock hats! And then, of course, the craziest guys get killed, and eventually Cao Cao winds up in charge, because Cao Cao is the most, well, he was the least funny. He was the least funny, and isn't that how life always goes? Yep. But anyway, though, I suppose that's all that I really have to say on this one. When I first started this, I thought I might have a little bit more to go on it, but as I think about it, because of how many characters are, it's a little bit difficult to really tell stories and get into characterizations, because I'll start talking about, like, oh no, Lu Biao, that guy, funny story about Lu Biao. Oh, well, I guess I could talk about the games. Dynasty Warriors has actually evolved quite a bit from the old original Dynasty Warriors 3, the old original. It's like what, third sequel. But the old original games, they were funny, but not intentionally funny. Like, you could tell that Koei they just had not paid enough to get the, or you know, not that they should have. The games were still great, but they hadn't really paid enough to get top-notch voice acting or top-notch animation. And this wound up producing like a lot of hilarity in all the cutscenes. Like, you could tell that they were trying to play it straight and be serious, but they just didn't have the talent to make it serious. But the gameplay was solid. Like, they put money in the right places. Like, it's a very gameplay-oriented game based around the story of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and the gameplay is great. Like, you have a ton of characters. All these characters do a lot of things, and they skimped on the voice acting and the cutscenes. So it winds up being really hilarious to play through. But as the games kind of go forward, I think that Koei realized that people were laughing at the games and having a really good time laughing at the games. And so they started to add more of their own sort of comedy to it. And this, I feel, was sad. Because it's really difficult to be ironically funny. Like, if you sit down and you're like, alright, I'm going to be so dumb that it's funny. Like, a lot of times you just come across as dumb. Because you're intentionally being dumb. But when you get up there and you really earnestly try, and it's just dumb, like, that's actually amusing. That's like, oh man, like, good try. Like, good try. In death my soul will be my brother's. Like, pivotal moment. Flood. Yeah. But yeah, they also changed the character designs a lot, too. Which was a shame. Like, they took Lu Bu, and he used to run around with, like, peacock feathers in his hair. Like, great big peacock feathers, and, like, this garish, like, bright red, traditional sort of looking Chinese armor. And he had, like, pointed boots and things like that. And one of his moves was that he would just kick you straight up in the air with his pointed boots. And, yeah, it was just super comical looking. But then they changed him over to being, like, he wears all black armor. And they took away his spear. And this is weird. He had this halberd, and that halberd that he carried around actually was sort of famous. Like, him and his horse and his weapons, like everything associated with Lu Bu. He was a very profound warrior, and so like his weapon was also a big deal. Like his halberd was a big deal, and so for some reason Dynasty Warriors as a franchise was just like, you know what? Too many people in this game have, like, halberds and spears and swords and other, like, practical weapons. So let's give them, like, I don't know, boomerangs and nunchucks and, like, just shields. You know, they use a shield as a weapon as opposed to... And it's just sort of like, well, I don't know, you're kind of missing the point of having these iconic characters. And then I guess, like, Lu Bu had a daughter, and so they started introducing female characters into the combat. which is kind of weird. Because when you get to understand the context of the characters a little bit, and then you see them like in conflict, when the voice acting was really bad and the cutscenes were really bad, it only made it that much funnier. Like, to imagine, like, yeah, Cowpee's wife got loose. She's out here, and you just have to think, like, she's out here with the flute, and oh yes, no, it's working. She is actually taking that flute and she is beating the enemy to death with it. Like, yeah, where's Cowpea right now? Oh, Cowpea was routed, but his wife is unstoppable. Like, oh my god. Yeah. In fact, I'm not sure, but I think that they did, one thing that they did was they had, Zenji was Cowpea's wife. And so I think that when Zenji was on the field, Cowpea was actually her subordinate officer. And like, if you know that in the actual book, like, Zenji would have been his wife and would theoretically have been, like, she should have theoretically had no military power. When they depict her in the game as having, like, all this power and she's, like, super dangerous, and her husband didn't even get a special model. So it was kind of like there's these overtones of just like, yep, Zenji wears the pants in this relationship. she controls Cowpeas every waking moment. Yeah. So same thing too. There's another one, Sun Shangjiang, which again, the name's pronouncing weird. They poisoned my ability to pronounce the name. She's another female character, and she's a little bit weird because the game kind of like there's one section of the game that sort of acknowledges that she really wasn't with the same army throughout the entire duration of the conflict. She got married to Liu Bei, I guess. And so, like, the game sort of sets her up on the Wu conflict, and she never really switches over sides. But then the game is like, yeah, she sort of did marry Liu Bei. She was actually practiced in some amount of combat, but I don't think she actually ever went to the front lines. So she was one of the ones that had some practical sense, but was just probably a really awkward character to place. But they were like, yeah. Sun Changjian, she goes in there, and they probably needed her because a lot of people on the Wu side, like the Wu was just hit with tragedy after tragedy. Like, you just watch, it's like, yeah, Sun Jian gets killed, and then his son gets killed, and then Sun Quan managed to make it for quite a ways, but people keep dying over on the Wu side. People die a lot on the Wei side too, but they get replaced right off the bat. So like there was just more resources for the Wei side, and the Shu army is as well. You have a couple of heroes that just stick it out for a really, really long time, and then eventually they start to die of like exhaustion or whatever. There's one guy, Zhang Fei. There's three brothers that are really important: Liu Bei, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei. And then like Zhang Fei, when Guan Yu died, Zhang Fei he got drunk and he mourned a long time, and his generals came to him and they were like, "Sir, how long do we have to dress in black and act like we're sad?" And so Zhang He beat them. And then he got drunk and he went to go be sad by himself. So while he was passed out drunk, his generals, a little mad with him, got together and killed him, because he wasn't really Zhang Fei wasn't regarded as a very good. He wasn't regarded as a very sensible man or a very level-headed man. He was just a very strong man. He was a good soldier, but not the greatest leader. Anyway, what else? I don't know. I suppose that'll be it for today. Like I say, fun. I recommend getting into it. There's a lot of characters to learn, so it's a little tough to pick up at first. Like, you won't be able to recognize what's going on right off the bat. But if you can find Dynasty Warriors 3 for like a, at all, I recommend starting with that because it's super hokey and it's super funny. And I don't know about the later games so much, but the really funny hokey stuff kind of drew me in. And then afterward, I got kind of more interested in the actual historical context. Yeah. But anyway, though, thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.